welcome to the show, Marlene.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming and talking a little bit. I wanted to let you go ahead and just introduce a little bit about yourself so that we can get into that. I know we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to have you on for a few segments so we can really take some time to get into this. But first, before we talk about House of Numbers and everything else we've got to cover, tell everybody a little bit about you, briefly your journey to where we are now.
Yes, that story alone can probably take up a few segments, but started a couple of years ago as a graduate student in mental health therapy. I had started to look for opportunities to work with the gay community, as that had been one of my goals in specializing with this community. And during this time, I had someone, a friend of mine who I'd known for a while, but we never really discussed anything that had to do with HIV. But she basically told me, if you're going to work with this community, you truly need to do some research in HIV and what we've been taught and some hidden history there. And I kind of put it in the back of my mind and thought, yeah, I guess that's something I should probably look into. I thought I knew everything I needed to know about HIV, and I've been in school for many years and had taken many classes that covered that topic, so I wasn't exactly sure what she was talking about. And during this time frame, I also coincidentally, and well, I say coincidentally, but I think things truly happen for a reason, a loved one of mine, I had come to find out that he was on the AIDS drugs for 2 years during the same time frame, and that's when I truly, it was devastating. I never had anyone in my family or anyone close to me be affected by this, so that's when her suggestion really came to mind, and when I reached out to her and said, now I really need to know what you're talking about because I have someone that I love that's on these drugs and I know that they're very dangerous. And that's when I came across all of this information, basically that contradicts everything I've been taught about HIV.
So after having a loved one affected by taking the HIV drugs and the AIDS drugs, you decided to look further into it and use your expertise and your education to bring awareness to this issue, and that brings us to the documentary House of Numbers. How did you get involved with that?
Well, yes. Basically, once I started getting some of this information and really digesting it, it was truly just mind-blowing. I felt like I was starting over and like reprogramming everything I had been taught. I was still in my grad school program, and I went to them and basically said, I want to submit my own research about HIV because I was set to take another class that was going to just feed me the same information I had been given. And I requested that they allow me to submit this independent research. And finally, after months of fighting with them all the way up the chain to the department chair, they allowed me to submit the research. And that's where I really dug and found everything that I submitted, and also came across House of Numbers, and was just like, I felt like this movie truly gave both sides of the story in one film, and it was something that people could just watch and at least get a good basis of the information. And that's where I got more involved and reached out to some of the people that were in the film. Prior to mental health, I had some background in professionally in advertising, marketing, and PR. So I kind of used that to really just start to be more involved, because I felt like knowing this information just wasn't enough anymore, especially once I came across how this affects children and families. And so I started working with some of the people involved in the film, like Celia Farber and Liam Chef and some others, who have other projects that they're working on to bring more awareness to this topic. So that's really just been my mission the past couple of years, just sharing this with my patients, with my clients, and with really anyone who listens.
Yeah, definitely. I was glad to meet with you and talk with you about this in New York, because as I said a little bit earlier in the show, I've done some reading on different angles of AIDS, and I'm sure as you've done some research, you've also seen that there's other controversies surrounding where this comes from, or if it, in fact, as House of Numbers questions, if this syndrome is even real, in fact. So I want to let's get into that for now. Let's start talking about, what does House of Numbers focus on? What is the controversy that they're focusing on regarding HIV and AIDS?
Well, basically, they interview the orthodox side that, the scientists from NIH and the CDC, and they go over the history of this illness since it started. And then also they interview some scientists and journalists and people who have been involved in basically spreading awareness to the fact that what we've been told is not the case. And a lot of it, I think, boils down to the test itself and what it truly is testing for. Like you said, there are a lot of controversies, and we call them conspiracies, as to what, how HIV was created, whether it was created in the lab or where it came from. And I had heard of those, yes, but didn't really place much stock in them. But when I understood what the test itself tests for and what it, more importantly, does test for, and understood the real science behind the test itself and the so-called disease itself and what it came from and how they define what it means and what it is. We're not really talking about a conspiracy anymore. We're talking about true, facts that the test really, truly is not testing for this virus that they say that it's testing for. And that's listed in its own disclaimers. So that's basically what the film covers, and it covers some testimony, some people who have been, affected by this, and whether they were on the drugs or they're not off the drugs, and how the difference in their health being on and off of them, and once they understood the really the controversy as to what this test really even means.
So essentially, so I watched the documentary the other night, and I recommend everybody check it out first. Go ahead, search for House of Numbers. The full documentary is available online. It's dealing with this controversy, and I think it does do a pretty good job. As you said, they interview the National Institute of Health, they interview the Center for Disease Control. They show both sides. They show Dr. Gallo, the first person to discover supposedly AIDS, and give it its name. And so they show all these different perspectives, and I really was surprised to find out that, okay, this is one big thing, I think, that to have an AIDS diagnosis, it changed, the number of criteria for that changed depending on what doctor and country you're in.
Absolutely. That was, for me as well, one of the pieces of information that really kind of put the nail in the coffin for me, where I was like, what? Like, how is it possible you have this deadly, supposedly sexually transmitted illness that, is deadly, and in one part of the country or the world, the test has a certain criteria that determines that you're positive, and in another country, there's a completely different criteria. So essentially, you could be positive in one country and negative in a different country, and that was like, didn't make sense at all to me. If you have a tumor, supposedly, if you have an illness, it doesn't matter what country you're in, you have that illness.
Exactly.
So that is actually what has helped many of my clients and my patients who I've share this information with really feel more secure in their decision on coming off the drugs. Is they've actually gone to different countries and tested and come out negative in other countries, and basically started their lives over in those countries, and were able to then get married and have children and not be harassed by the medical establishment, which is a huge danger in taking this test and being labeled with this diagnosis. So that was one of the things, and it's right, I mean, it's accepted by even that side, by the orthodox side, by the medical community. It's accepted that is the case. The criteria is not, there's no standard. So that alone, I mean, it's kind of, it just destroys their whole argument for what this disease is, I think.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Conscious Resistance. My name is Derek Brose. You're listening to OrionTalkRadio.com, and thank you for doing so. I'm going to remind you guys once more that if you gotta go, if you're checking out my show and you're on the run, you can take me with you and hear me discussing all kinds of important topics, such as House of Numbers that we're talking with Marlene about now. You can do this with the TuneIn app. Just search Orion Talk Radio and you'll find us there. And of course, we're online, so take advantage of that if you got one of those fancy smartphones. So let's continue this conversation, Marlene. I wanted to go into a couple of other things. So we just discussed how essentially one of the issues with the AIDS controversy is that it can be diagnosed in one country as positive and then diagnosed in another country as negative because there's no standards for what exactly it is. It seems that from the interviews shown in the film, there really is no consensus on what makes HIV or what makes AIDS. So that's one obvious issue, that there's no standards for that. Because as you said, if you have a tumor, if you have a disease, you should have it no matter what country you're from. But the other issue, and where it seems to be pointing at, is that the drugs given to the patients themselves seem to be causing a lot of the health issues. Could you tell us more?
Exactly. Yes, the drugs used in the beginning of all of this were basically drugs that were developed for cancer patients and deemed too dangerous for cancer patients, so then they were shelved. They're chemotherapy drugs. So essentially, like, cancer patients get chemotherapy. It's a very toxic treatment, and they take it for a while and they get breaks from it. Well, HIV positive patients take these drugs every single day, sometimes several times a day for the rest of their lives, and really essentially destroy their immune system and their cells, their good cells, everything in their body. So it's basically, the drugs do what they say the disease is supposed to do. So the drugs are extremely toxic. They're black box label drugs, which is the highest warning that the FDA issues, and they cause death and all types of side effects. Well, really effects. I don't even call them side effects. They're extremely dangerous, and like I said, do exactly what the disease is basically they say the disease is supposed to do.
Exactly. So this has been a concern of a number of people. As you said, you mentioned chemotherapy, where oftentimes people wonder and worry that the drugs that we're giving are actually causing detrimental effects and not improving. And then we have it shown in the film where individuals make choices to get off the drugs and their health improves. Now, there was a change in the drugs, though. The original drug that was causing problems with HIV AIDS patients was, is it ATZ?
AZT,
AZT, and then they were changed to a number of different types of drugs. But has there been any improvement now? Is there less side effects, or are we still today in 2013? Are AIDS patients, HIV patients, are they still taking these drugs that are damaging their body more than they're helping?
Yeah, well, yeah. The drugs are still very toxic. They did lower the dosage of AZT. They say that there is an AZT in them, but I know that for babies especially, I know that for a fact that's what they still give babies that test positive. They give them AZT, and pregnant mothers, they give them AZT. So, but yes, the other drugs that have been developed since then are not. They're still toxic, and they cause many problems. And some people they've caused death very early on, and for others, they can be on them for years, which really then basically is why they say they're so life-saving, because now people aren't dying as quickly as they used to die in the 80s. But it's not because the drugs are that much better. It's just because they're not as poisonous and toxic, so people can live longer on them. But the question is, should they be on them in the first place? And, for adults, you have that choice. But for children, for babies, for pregnant women, not so much. And that's where I feel like it kind of inspired me to reach out to you and to other groups of people who are for, the government staying out of our lives, to understand that this is an issue where no matter what you believe about HIV, whether you believe that it's truly an illness or not, that you feel that you should have the right to determine what medicines your babies are on and your children are on. And when you've been targeted with this illness, you don't have that right. You no longer have that right to determine, whether that be the case or not. So that was really why I felt like this was something that, especially right now, like you said, with the story of the child that the girl from the House of Numbers, Lindsay, had, is now being drugged with these drugs, forcibly being drugged with them, why I felt like reaching out to you guys and trying to spread that awareness, because we have to do something about that.
Definitely, and that's mentioned. And I recommend the film. You'll see she was. I'll let you tell the story, Marlene. But she's a part of the film, and she's now an adult who has had her own child. And as you said, once your child is, or you are labeled HIV positive, then you sort of lose the right to decide what you're going to do for your body or your child's body, because the state comes in and takes over. So let's hear more about that.
Yes. Lindsay Nagel, she is in the film House of Numbers. She is 22 or 23 years old now and was adopted by a family in Minnesota as an infant from Romania. When they tested her in Romania as a baby, and she came out negative, and then she was brought to the United States and they retested her, and she came out positive here. Now, something to kind of mention is she was probably vaccinated when she was brought to the United States after that first test, and the vaccines have been shown to cross-react with these tests, so it could very easily have been caused by that or anything else. Who knows? There's so many reasons why it could have been the case, but she tested positive in the United States once her adoptive parents had her, and they put her on the AZT when she was a child, and she had extreme effects from it, painful effects from it. The parents were really desperate for answers. And, what go to the doctors and say, listen, my baby is really sick. What's going on? These drugs are making her so sick. And they say, well, that's the HIV. That's what it does. And everything was HIV. So they came across some of this information that Peter Duesberg was putting out at the time. And he's one of the scientists who opposes the theories around HIV. And they fought to have, her taken off the drugs, and were able to do so. At that time, in that town, I believe there were 12 babies on AZT, and Lindsay was the only one taken off of the drugs, and today she's the only one alive. She's the only one that lived past, I believe, age 6 out of those 12 babies. So, I mean, that alone is such a testimony to what these drugs do to children, and are they necessary? I mean, she's 22 years old. She's been healthy her whole life, other than the effects from the drugs. And like you said, she's now a mom and has a baby, with her fiance, and that baby is now being drugged. There's more to the story, but at first, yes, she had the baby, and they're forcing the drugs on the child now, even though she is alive today because she stopped taking them.
Oh yeah, I want to get more into this. We're about to cut into a break here for a second, but yeah, that was one of the first things that really caught my ear and wanted me to hear more about this when you told me that aspect, and looking into the story of this baby and how. I mean, to be honest, I know that the state supposedly has these authorities where they can come in and they can do all kinds of experiments on, for example, foster children who are owned by the state, but I never knew the extent that they could come in for something such as HIV and declare that they literally own this child and can make decisions for this family. Eric Bros, this is the Conscious Resistance. We're talking with Marlene about House of Numbers and Baby Rico. Let's continue that story, Marlene. Just let us know a little bit more about where that has gone, how it happened, and anything else you want to leave us with.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So they basically took the baby when he was born. Obviously, Lindsay is well known in the town for being someone who has been labeled with this so-called virus all these years and never on the drugs and still alive and well. So I believe that they kind of knew who she was, and unfortunately she went into the system to have this child, and they took the child away, forcibly drugged the child by inserting a tube into his belly, and he was in their care for quite a while, was breastfeeding before that happened, so then they had to then put a breathing tube. He had infections, all kinds of problems. I can send you the details on later. Then they went to court for this. The judge ordered that the state still be involved in making sure that she's drugging the child. She has to Skype twice a day with caseworkers for the state to prove that she's drugging the child with these poisonous drugs. And the newest development is that as of 3 days ago, he was rushed to the hospital with a life-threatening illness caused by the drugs, and the doctors ordered the drugs to stop as of 3 days ago. So that's where we're at with this story, and that's why it's so important for us all to get involved, to, hopefully it be the case that they keep him off the drugs. I'm hoping for that. I know they want to make an example out of this case, but the fact that the drugs were causing this life-threatening illness, I hope that he stays off of them. And right now we are working to spread more awareness about this story. I'm working with Celia Farber. She's filming a documentary about this, and we have some pages we're going to be setting up for, hopefully, having people help support that cause, and just be involved if there are court proceedings where we can kind of show up and make sure that they know that we know what's going on and we want this baby to stay off these drugs that could, really, they can be the end of his life. And almost were. So they stopped them 3 days ago, and that's like where we're at with the story right now.
I saw that the other day, so I mean, it's still happening, it's still being updated, we're still finding out more about this, and is it possible for this to happen to another family?
Absolutely. From my understanding, and I know you write for Intel Hub, and there's another person that's I know that's involved with that station. I heard his show where he knows he's been covering this story for a while, and when his wife was pregnant, he didn't want to have her tested for HIV and rejected the test, and they basically threatened to have protective services come in, child protective services come in. So yeah, this happens to anyone. If you reject the test because you know that it's, once you do this research, you know the implications of what could happen. Yeah, it's not legally mandatory, but they can harass you. They can call Child Protective Services in, and really that's what they do. They bully you into taking it, and it's plain Russian roulette, because if it comes back positive for any number of reasons, you can look online. There's a published list of all different kinds of conditions and circumstances that make these tests come out positive. Even being pregnant itself is a reason that the test comes out positive, because pregnant women have antibodies in their system that react with this test. So yeah, it affects all of us, and people need to understand that pregnant women are at tremendous risk if they subject themselves to these tests, and then they can't get out of the system. I mean, the only way out is leaving the country, which if you come back, you'll be jailed. Who knows what could happen.
Wow, that's a lot to take in, Marlene. I do appreciate you coming on, even just for a couple of short segments, to try to bring this story to everybody's awareness. And as I said, please check out the House of Numbers, check out Baby Rico's story, look further into this, and ask yourself these questions. I mean, is AIDS really what we've been told, or what most of us assume it is, or is there more to the story? Find out for yourself and stay in touch. Marlene, where can everybody find out for you?
Well, I'm on Facebook under Marlene Ivette. www.truthbarrier.com will be set up to take donations for Rico and his story. I'm constantly posting things on my page about this, and posting the local media coverage. It's gotten quite a bit of local media coverage since the beginning, when he was removed from the home, and that's all on my page as well. And I have other brochures and links to all other types of documentaries and books and medical literature. I've been kind of collecting over the years. I'm happy to share with anyone who has questions. Usually people contact me once I've been on shows like this, because they know someone who's positive, or they are, and they need more information. So feel free to contact me, and I can direct you to the proper resources.
Thank you very much, Marlene. Thank you for joining us. Everybody check it out. Please dig deeper. Enjoy the rest of your day, Marlene.
Thank you so much for having me, Derek.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks.